of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by introducing my two colleagues. On my left, I have Mr. Andy Ellis, who's the Assistant Director of Policy, and on my right, John Dunn, who is the Services Director General of Communications. I appreciate this opportunity to appear before the committee with a view to clarifying a number of issues that have arisen as a result of remarks I made during the CBC special on CSIS. I would propose to take a few minutes available to me to comment on the following. 1, CSIS's decision to be more open to the public. 2, the nature and scope of foreign interference in Canada. 3, an explanation of how I came to mention the possibility of 2 specific foreign interference cases. And 4, the extent to which anyone outside the service was aware of foreign interference in general and the 2 cases specifically. Let me start with why I believe Canadians should be more informed about the threats Canada faces. While the CSIS Act has set up a comprehensive package of accountability, oversight and control over CSIS, involving the Minister, the Federal Court, the Security and Intelligence Review Committee and the Inspector General, its activities, and especially the threats it must deal with, are relatively little known. Or to the extent they are known, these threats and activities arise in the context of specific cases or inquiries where it is often difficult for the service to set out its perspective as the principal Canadian agency designated to protect the national security. With the exception of the horrific case of the Air India attack, a few other terrorist attacks, and some instances that were successfully prevented, for example, the Toronto 18, we have not seen much terrorism on Canadian soil. And we do not as a country often reflect on threats relative to espionage, terrorism, and foreign interference. I would argue it is good public policy for Canadians to be more attuned to the threats that the country faces. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I would like to take a moment and explain to the committee how the most controversial part of the recent interview came to be in the public domain. I am referring to the cases of foreign interference. I made these remarks during a question and answer session following a speech I gave at the Royal Canadian Military Institute on Police Appreciation Night. This took place on March 24th of this year. As part of an agreement between the service and the broadcaster to develop a special broadcast commemorating the 25th anniversary of the service, we agreed they could film my visit to the RCMI. I thought the filming was limited to my speech, and so in answering a question, I provided a degree of granularity or detail to an audience of police, intelligence, and military experts that I would not have provided to the public. Confronted by the broadcaster in late June with the substance of the remarks recorded 3 months earlier, I felt I had little choice but to address them in a forthright manner. I agree that this was not the optimal way in which to have this matter raised in public, and wished that it had turned out differently. Permettez-moi, Monsieur le Président, de soulever 2 points.
Let me, Mr. Chair, make 2 points. My comments did not in any way endanger national security, and it was entirely by inattention on my part that the details were made public. I do not agree with all the criticism of these remarks, but I regret any distress I might have caused and would not provide such detail again. Having said this, I stand by my general message on foreign interference. It is a concern and a threat. It is more common here and elsewhere than many think, and it is desirable that this threat should be known and discussed. And indeed, as I will reference again later, this matter is not new and has been raised in many of our recent public reports available to all Canadians. As I mentioned a few moments ago, the examples I gave did not and do not today meet the criteria for us to consider them to constitute threats to the security of Canada. As such, they had not and have not been briefed to the Minister of Public Safety, although he is generally aware of foreign interference in Canada. The same applies to the Privy Council Office.
The question was the issue of foreign interference. Let me take a few minutes to discuss its nature, scope, and extent. Parliament clearly recognized the existence of this problem at the time the CSIS Act was passed in 1984. Thus, CSIS has a clear mandate to investigate foreign interference as a potential threat to the security of Canada. I say potential because unlike cases of terrorism or espionage where the threat to national security is more immediate and where the ramifications can be extremely serious, for example, loss of life or loss of serious national secrets, foreign interference operates on a range of seriousness, and it is only the most serious cases which constitute clear threats to national security. I'll provide some examples in a couple of minutes. First, what is foreign interference? Simply put, it is an attempt by agents of a foreign state to influence the opinion, views, and decisions of Canadians with the aim to obtaining a political, policy, or economic advantage. The CSIS Act talks about the threat of foreign influenced activities as, quote, activities within or relating to Canada that are detrimental to the interest of Canada and are clandestine or deceptive or involve a threat to any person. This is, of course, a broad definition that can involve many facets of behavior, but it's important to note that for behavior to be considered as true foreign influence, it must be directed against the interests of Canada and must be deceptive in nature. It is
also important to note that unlike terrorism or espionage that can result in more immediate damage to our national security, foreign influence is really more of a process of relationship building. This is not a simple binary black and white issue. We are dealing here with a spectrum of behavior by foreign entities that often start out innocently but later veer towards something that actually harms Canadian interests. This is a very subtle process. Central to our concerns with true foreign interference is the strong belief that decisions about Canada must be made by Canadians for Canadian reasons. And that means by those whose loyalty is to Canada, whether they have been here for generations or have just received their citizenship last week.
Are sometimes caught in this process of foreign interference unwittingly, and we assume from the outset that citizens are loyal. Our central concern is with what foreign powers are trying to do in Canada and why.